Dungeons & Dragons, or D&D, and games like it, tabletop role-playing games, which I call D&D likes, have an often misconstrued concept known to many as balance. But there's currently a problem with the discourse surrounding the usage of the word balance. Balance in game design comes in many forms. Power levels, amount of options, player skill, character skill, adhesion, and cohesion are some example forms of balance. Cohesion is the specific form of balance to whom most refer in D&D, that is, the idea that the party's makeup should account for a variety of strengths and weaknesses, which permits some characters to be stronger in areas that other characters aren't. First, let's take the time to define the different forms of balance I just mentioned, and also discuss them along the way. Power level is the second most common form of balance discussed in regular discourse, and refers to the raw fighting prowess of the characters in the game. It stands to reason that when faced with an option to use a weapon or ability that deals 1d6 damage, compared to one that deals 2d6 damage with no other differences, then the choice is clear. Pick the one with more damage. The most commonly discussed challenge with this kind of balance is usually about the comparison of power level of the party to the power level of the enemy group they're facing. But the fact of the matter is that player and game master creativity can drive interesting scenarios when the gap between those two power levels is wide. No, personally, I think the challenge with power level balance is in creating interesting choices for the players to decide between when determining which weapon or ability they'd like to employ. This means introducing more complex mechanics than just damage, such as accuracy, buffs, status afflictions, combos, spatial bonuses or detriments, environmental hazards, and more. At least in the beginning, you should prioritize making a fun set of decisions for the players to make over whether one group clearly outmatches the other. And if that is a concern, for at least the beginning of the campaign, err on the side of the players winning more easily. Power level balance is different from, but somewhat related to, options balance. The players should have a variety of choices, all of which are good options, with no one option being way better than the others, with one notable exception. If the reason this option is way better than the others is due to the ability being situational, then that's completely fine. The important thing to note is that providing more options means providing more power, but not through raw stats. I mean, give your players credit. They will probably pick the option that best suits the situation. Now, I'm no stranger to players never deciding to use a really powerful ability, but still, be prepared for your players to make a good decision just as often as they make a bad one. And if they have 10 choices in a given scenario, they'll probably narrow down their choices to 3 or 4 that make the most sense. This provides the character with extra power without actually buffing anything on the character sheets. Next up, we have player skill, which is very different from character skill. Player skill is the specific set of strengths and weaknesses that the player playing the game brings to the table. The best way to describe this form of balance is that player skill is one of the few traits that are different if two players each play the exact same character. If you have a table entirely made up of completely new players, a specific adventure is going to be more challenging for that table to succeed when compared to the table filled with veterans. There are, of course, scenarios where player skill levels are varied across a single table, which I found can either be good or bad, depending on the demeanor of the veteran or veterans. I found it's better when the veteran player is nurturing over being a player who strives for a successful adventure. The latter can easily be the sort of player that ruins the campaign and the hobby as a whole for new players if they do not have that nurturing spirit. We already talked about cohesion, which is the idea that the characters in a party need a variety of strengths and weaknesses. So finally, we have adhesion, which is the balance concept that ensures that the characters fit narratively within the game being played. Some would argue this isn't a type of balance, but I argue that it is. With all these types of balance described, it's time to properly answer the question, what exactly is balance in a game like this? Well, balance is certainly not the idea that every choice in a decision has an equal measure of validity, but rather balance is the idea that every choice in a decision has some valuable use case. More precisely, balance is the idea that choices have the potential to be valuable. Let me present an example. What's the purpose of attacking with your fists in a game with weapons and magic? Clearly, your fists deal much less damage than another option. Well, what if you have no capacity to cast magic left at the moment? What if you have no weapons on your character? It is fully within the realm of possibility to need to fight after being disarmed, especially in a heavily political campaign. Alternatively, what if you were fighting a foe with a ridiculously small amount of health, and every time you landed an attack, there's a large chance of the attack being deflected back at your character? Suddenly, you want a way to deal a small amount of damage. Overall, here are the heuristics I would use to determine whether or not an ability should be in the game. 1. Would there be a case where I would use it? 2. Would there be a case where I wouldn't use it? 3. What does using it cost me? And 4. What does using it give me? As an example of this, take an item such as a grappling hook. In a campaign where the party is going to be traveling, I could find a great use for it, though it might not be perfect for combat. If I use a grappling hook, I'm committing using my arm and action to try to aim for a surface for extra traversal potency. But if the entire game has no sense of landscape traversal, why would you ever select a grappling hook over some stronger combat option? You can already start to see how these questions help you to determine whether something should be in the campaign or not. I know it seems somewhat obvious to say the stuff you add to your campaign should match the campaign itself, but that's the ultimate conclusion here. But this conclusion still doesn't exactly carve a path to a simple solution. You still need to balance new items and abilities introduced throughout the game with abilities that already exist in the game. Sometimes the combos produced by combining two items or abilities together can be game-breaking. Here's my golden rule when it comes to something that is game-breaking. Leave it be until it starts actually breaking the game. And if it truly is breaking the game wide open, talk with the player about a way that you can come to an agreement on that element. A technique I like to use is to remove the broken part of it, but also add some completely unrelated buff that's more in flavor with whatever that element's original design intention was. I've had players ask me why I'm giving their broken item a buff. From my perspective, I'm fixing a broken feature. From the player's perspective, their item is getting even stronger. To make a long story short, I feel that D&D-like players discussing balance is just a small portion of the possible discussions that the term balance could actually mean, when the possibility space is so much wider than I think people realize. So go ahead into the comments and let's have a discussion about game balance. I love talking about game balance. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.